Good evening, friends. It's Chris Angel coming at you for another episode of Marketing for the Rest of Us. Tonight, we're going to talk about how scary it can be to think for yourself. How scary it can be to think for yourself. So, it is interesting. Thank you, coronavirus, for the peek into humanity and all that we get to learn from this current event. It's interesting when you look at the opinions about this, right? I've been trolling Facebook for the last couple of days, just watching threads, right? Watching people communicate with one another. Tonight I saw something from the governor of Washington State that had said something like, you all need to stay inside. You're putting people's lives at risk. Stop it. It was like this scolding 2-word, admonishment on the end of this tweet. I went and looked at the thread on Twitter, and you could just see like all the people that were having the same tone and anger. You could hear the emotional undertone or undercurrent of everybody in the thread, right? Which represents one group's perspective. Now there's other groups. I saw another thing on Facebook today. It was a C.S. Lewis quote from the atomic bomb era where I think the person in the Facebook post had said, replace atomic bomb with coronavirus. And then you read the excerpt, right? And it was talking about, the gist of it was, I can't say it to you, but the gist of it was like, if an atomic bomb is coming, then let's not live out the rest of our days in a bunker, right? In a bomb bunker. Let's live our lives loving one another and playing with our kids and having, making memories with our family, things like that, right? And that represents another group of people who are like, hey, I'm going to live my life and do what I want to do. You can't keep me a prisoner in my home. And then there's that group thought, right? So it's interesting. It's interesting when you are an outlier. For me, it's not that simple. I can't take one side or the other. It's just not that simple. This is what happens in groupthink. Have you heard of groupthink? Years ago, I remember as a Christian, in my Christian days, I call them, there was this, the whole group of people began to think and say the same things. And for me anyway, I was in my early 20s. I just said what we all say. And then we just all say it. And at some level, we stop thinking for ourselves. And we just say what the herd is saying. And the challenge with that is that it's never that way. When you open up your perspective and the awareness of it all, what happens is you realize there's more than one perspective. There's more than one possible solution here. There's more than one right way. There is no one right way. There are multiple things to consider, right? And for us in this tribe, what I know about now, the people like me, is that we tend to look at the whole picture. And we know that it's not binary. We know that it's not this way or that way. There are so many gray areas in all of it, right? If we talk more about the coronavirus thing, like on one hand, yeah, like if we go out, we could be a carrier. It's not that I'm worried about getting myself sick, but I could be a carrier. Okay, I get that. And at the same time, like, are we supposed to, if this goes for 16 months, are we supposed to just, live in a bunker for 16 months? What happens to the economy when businesses shut down? People's livelihoods right now are drying up because their business can't sustain itself. It's an impossible situation to say, oh, it's just this way or it's just that way. And so, like I was saying, us in this tribe, we see that there's more to it than just this way or that way. It's not binary, right? And we know this. And it's not just about the coronavirus, it's about other things, because we've gone from being in the matrix to like rising and seeing that we've gone from seeing one perspective to seeing multiple perspectives in our life because of the life lessons we've seen. A lot of times in our journey as adults, we go through life and we get to a place where how we used to do it doesn't work for us anymore. And then we get stuck in this karmic loop of trying to find the answers that feel right and aligned for us. And then at some point, we've seen so many different angles in the pursuit of finding the right answer for us that we start to get jaded by all of them. Or we start to embrace all of them, right? In other words, we realize it's not just one or the other. We've peeked behind the curtain and realized the propaganda. We've realized we just can see all the sides. So here's why this matters for us in this tribe. Because we see from a different vantage point. One, we can provide perspective. But that's scary when our perspective is not the mob's perspective. What happens is we quickly can be outcasts. There's no way I would go pick a fight with either side. I just wouldn't, because one, they don't want to hear it. But two, it doesn't necessarily create change for them. So I'm not here to lead a conversation about the coronavirus. I'm clear that that's not what I get to do here in this lifetime. My life is about helping entrepreneurs, business people who want to make the world a better place, who want to heal the world. That's my conversation. How do I help those in business with that kind of a healing business? How do I help those people find their tribe and continue their important work in the world? And so I started to see that years ago. Marketing was the same way. Like, marketing was taught in a very binary way. This is the way you market, or this is the way you sell, right? But I'd been through enough of the sales courses and personal development programs and all the different things that I realized it wasn't just one way. Now, while I was inside of a company, groupthink set in. This is what happens. When you're in a mob, groupthink sets in. So I realized, I started to say the things that you say when you're in the company. I started to sing the company line and toe the company line. And as I stepped out of that role and started my own business, I could see where some of that was good, but it wasn't the whole picture. And I realized in the space of marketing, there was a whole other way that those of us who wanted to be aligned and authentic in our marketing, we could be behaving and doing it. And so I felt like it was given to me because I saw it and I was passionate about it. And I had a heart for the people who felt lost inside their businesses and not aligned in their businesses. And I decided that would be a conversation I could lead. I had started to think for myself and not toe the company line. And in doing so, it actually led me to step out of that role and into the thing that I felt like I was meant to do. And as I did it, I shared what I saw about marketing into a culture, into an industry even, that wasn't ready to hear what I had to say. A lot of those people they were like, I don't get it. This doesn't make sense to me. This isn't how we do it. But I just believed enough in my life experience, and I'm like, there's something right about this for me, and I'm going to go find those who also see it this way. And so it was just, years of saying the same thing in different ways, but finding the right people that resonated with that message. And so let's wind this up. You also have been given some life lessons. Life has shared some things with you. And it can be scary to think for yourself. The good news is you're now in a place in life where you're thinking for yourself. You're no longer in the group think of it all. But you also, now that you're thinking for yourself, can see the binary thinking running the planet. And it's either this way or it's that way. And you know, and I know that that's not just the whole picture, is it? There's more to it than that. And so you're left with a choice of are you going to lead this conversation? And the good news is, because it's in your soul to do it, you have a heart for whatever the conversation is. Now, here's the good news. There are people who, like you, are hanging out in the background, not willing to get in a fight over the binary thinking of it all. They're hanging back and just not saying anything. And this is how it was for me in marketing. As I started to talk to people about authentic ways to do marketing, what I would notice is in a room full of people, when I would teach, a couple people would come up afterwards and say, thank you for giving me permission to be myself. It wasn't the whole room. The whole room didn't do that, but a couple did. and then a couple, and then a couple, right? So I started to realize there are people out there who just aren't saying anything because they're afraid to be an outcast. They're afraid that the mob will cast them out if they raise their hand and say, I don't really get this. This doesn't fit for me. So they just don't say anything. And when you begin to voice your opinion and your perspective about the shades of gray you see, what you'll start to notice is that people, one by one, will say, wow, this is really refreshing because I was just starting to hide out in the background and watch humanity kill itself, right? I was just watching humanity kill each other because everybody was fighting about how right they were about their perspective. But thank God I found you, and I'm so glad to know that I'm not alone and that you see things like I see things. This is so important right now because part of what adds to the anxiety is the fear that you're going to be killed by the mob. That if the mob even finds out that I don't believe everything that they're saying, God help me that I don't die from the mob and their lashings on Twitter or whatever. And so as we begin to lead our conversations, the conversations in our soul to lead, and you start to find others who are like, oh my God, thank you for saying what you said because I don't feel so alone. Just like when I would teach and people would come up to me afterwards in marketing programs and say, thank you for giving me permission to be myself. And those words for me were like gold. I don't really value gold, so I don't know. They were so rewarding and validating. Right? That, and it was life-giving to them because they had put their life on the line to have a business for themselves, and they just couldn't find themselves in it for the longest time because the binary thinking of marketing and sales was only taught in so many ways, and none of it ever felt good to them. So what I'm saying to you tonight, if you can't already tell, which I think you can, is that you have something to say to the world. And life has given you the lesson, and you have conviction for that thing. How do you know the thing? Because you have conviction for it. Wherever you have conviction, that's the thing. And there are others who would love to hear what you have to say about that thing because they're hiding from the binary thinking of the way the rest of the world thinks about that thing. Could be parenting. And this is how you parent. No, this is how you parent. And you realize there are more ways to parent than that. Or they think this is how you get healthy. No, this is how you get healthy. And you see the grayer areas of how to get healthy. And they're so lost and confused in all the arguing about how to get healthy that they just hide out and give up. But as soon as you come forward with how you see the world, they actually are revived. Their hope is revived in that they could actually get healthy. Or maybe for you, it's healing. And for so many people, it's like, this is how you get through trauma. You got to have counseling. And somebody else says, no, this is how you go through trauma. You got to do it this way. And you realize it's more than just two stories here. There's a lot of gray areas. And that's what's so great about this tribe is that we when you know that you are the divine observing itself. Do you hear me? You are the divine in physical form, in a miniature expression of the entirety, observing itself. Then you realize that it's all contrast. It's all contrast. And ultimately, this is hard because you start to get to like what's right and wrong. It's a hard conversation. What is that called? Moral relativity? Like at some point, if you go up high enough, it's all source energy. It's all from the same source. And source energy is getting to know itself. It's observing itself and ever expanding. And sometimes in the lower vibrations of conversation where I want to attack you for your perspective and you want to attack me for my perspective, there's nothing constructive here. There's no expansion here. It kills off expansion. But when we can start to look at the gray areas of things and even lead conversations in those things, Like I'm leading a conversation in marketing, that there are other ways to do marketing than how everybody else is telling you. Something new opens up. There's a new possibility. There's new expansion. So, I feel like I could keep going here. Like, this is really not about the coronavirus. It's just a case study in this conversation, right? Like, I get the quarantine thing. I get that. Let's what is social distancing? I get all that. I get that. Do you notice like that's the one thing that everybody's talking about? And there are other things, there are other factors involved, right? Like the health of yourself. Like we can social distance ourselves, but while we're eating ice cream and drinking whiskey and making our bodies susceptible to things, I don't see people talking about that very much. It's out there a little bit, but the mob mentality is going to just the quarantine conversation, and there are just so many more sides to it. Right? Now, I understand maybe the quarantine thing is the one thing that allows us to stop things, and there's more to the conversation. My point here is not to go back into the binary thinking of this conversation, but it is to point to the fact that what happens in groupthink is we attach ourselves to one thing, and then we all talk about that one thing at the exclusion of all the other things. And this is why it's scary to think for yourself, because the minute you start to think for yourself, you open yourself up to be an outcast from the mob. But here's the good news. There are people who want to hear from you. There are people who are not in the mob, who are hanging out in the background, just like you and me, who see both sides and realize it can't just come down to one or the other. And so my invitation to you is to begin to, I would guess that for most of you, the conversation you're here to lead is not about pandemics, right? And viruses that spread. I would guess that for most of you, you have conversations of healing and transformation, relationships and parenting and love and things that you want to share. And there are others who are waiting to hear from you and your specific perspective that sees multiple angles than what they have already heard from others. And so this is just an invitation for you to begin to play with what you see. Just like, well, it's been over 7 years because I was doing it while I was in running that real estate company. I was starting to experiment with and explore these things I was seeing about marketing and how do we be ourselves and make real human connection with people without trying to manipulate and close them. So what is that for you, right? What is the conversation you're here to lead, and how can you begin to tip the toe out and to see who's responsive, see who's receptive to the way you see things? All right, gang, that's it for tonight. If you want to learn more about how I teach marketing in a way that is authentic and aligned to who you are, you can go to groundswellmethod.com. There's some free videos for you there. On the last page of those videos is an application button for my 6-week program. Okay. I think it's really important as a thought leader. You are a thought leader. So here, we'll wrap with this, gang. You are a thought leader. You have thoughts that others don't. And so if you choose to lead others in those thoughts, you are a thought leader, regardless of how much of a following you have. And when you have thoughts like that, you feel imprisoned when you can't share it. The flip side of that is when you do share it, you start to feel free. And ultimately what I want for you is to feel free in sharing the life lessons that life has given you. So here's to you, gang, sharing the life lessons that life has given you. Until tomorrow when we go live again, have a great night.